To all you folks out there in video land. I'm Don Halloran, and I smoke jumped in the early 1950s, 1953 to be in particular. And I was part of a generation that was called the college generation, which meant that guys at that time, no women, jumped for a few years. When they finished college, they had Uncle Sam's sniffing down their neck to go into the military. And like many of the guys, after 3 years of jumping, I was drafted into oddly enough, into the Navy. And so we never really planned to have a career, in wildland fighting, firefighting. So that's the generation that I was a part of. And I was 19 when I started. And I think the backstory here is pretty important, and that is that forest fires were considered absolutely terrible for the forest. There was no policies that allowed the Forest Service to understand the ecology of fire. So every fire that broke out, whether it was man-made or lightning strike, they tried to control. So that was the policy, that every fire was a bad fire. Secondly, we just finished World War II, and they had perfected parachuting, which a lot of the Forest Service people thought was an activity that crazy people did. In fact, there were official letters to that effect. But the idea was, because of the lack of roads, secondary roads, all out through the Mountain West here, you could get to a fire quickly and control it, and get relieved by a ground crew or get back out. So we have the technology of reasonably good airplanes, parachutes that were pretty reliable, and the policy of no fire is a good fire kind of thing. And then you have us 19-year-olds who had just seen a Hollywood production called Red Skies of Montana, starring Richard Widmark. That came out in '52, I think. And if any of you have ever seen the movie, there is not one incident in it that's accurate. It is a total fabrication of what Hollywood thinks smoke jumpers should be doing. But for the uninitiated, particularly myself living in Boston, Massachusetts, we thought it was the most heroic thing you could do, most exciting thing, and by God, it was in Montana as well, way the hell out there in the mountains. So those are the key background things. And to me, and I've written about this in another volume, it was basically a coming of age experience. It's sort of coming of age against the backdrop of firefighting. When we weren't on fires, we were poking around Missoula, and at that time, the main hangouts were along Woody Street, which is totally changed now. There were bars, gambling, lots of women, and the fire season when I started in '53 was so furious. You had barely a day off before you went back on another fire. 2 or 3 days between fires was about the maximum during that particular season. But it was pretty crazy because you get back to Missoula, get a shower and get cleaned up, and usually we would all head to town. Enough people had cars to go into town, and basically raise hell and come back, sleep it off, and go out on a fire. And to 19, 20-year-old kids, this was just the ultimate, in terms of, and by coming of age, I mean, figuring out how to handle your money properly, trying to save it to go back to college, adjusting to, having a few beers or more, and the various, female attachments that came and went during the summer. And another aspect was probably a third of all the jumpers were World War II veterans. A lot of them had been in the airborne. and there were some really, really tough characters. And so here's young kids, 19, 20 era, with these guys that had been through hell for a few years before, and all of our overhead, all of our foremen and stuff, they had all been through World War II, and a lot of them had been in the airborne, and so they were really tough guys, and they had stories to tell that would just curdle your blood, the atrocities of World War II and what they went through and the buddies they lost and so forth. So that's sort of my, in a nutshell, take on the impact of it. And I was so impressed with what went on and the excitement, the adventure, that first year that I came back for 2 more. And unfortunately, the next 2 years were very rainy fire seasons, and we just didn't get out that much. And then, as I said, I had finished college after my last year, and I no longer had a deferment because of being a college student. And so Uncle Sam, grabbed me. And after a couple of years in the Navy, and then I met a woman, and we eventually got married. But your life goes off in a direction that it was quite different, from that. I don't think any of the guys then thought of it as being a career, wildland firefighting. But now they stay with it. Some guys, for their whole, professional life. And the other thing that's happened is the Forest Service has finally understood the ecology of fire, and so they don't try and stomp out every fire. They have let burn zones. They have management plans that are much more ecologically sound than it was back then. So things have really changed quite a bit. And there were a few accidents along the way, the first 3 years, and a lot of us said, you stick with this too long, and something's going to happen to you. And one of the reasons I add this. The planes are very reliable, but any airplane can have problems, particularly flying low and getting into these updrafts and downdrafts in the mountains. And it's surprising over the years that there haven't been more, plane problems, but it's there. Because the activity of smoke jumping is inherently dangerous, period. And you can't say this will never happen again. And same with parachuting. All the things that can go wrong when you parachute can happen the first time or the 100th time you jump. I mean, it can be inverted. You can get the lines all tangled up. It cannot open properly. Just anything can happen, and it's not like I'm so experienced. I've got 102 jumps. Nothing bad is going to happen up there. The next time that chute could just go to hell on you. It's a low incidence of that, but when you go out that door, you realize, okay, I hope the hell in 3 seconds it opens, the way it's supposed to, or else I can twist it around or cut a line that's gone over and and take care of it. But those are the inherently, and on the ground, a fire, behavior of fire, you can't predict that. Absolutely no way. And the Man Gulch, disaster, everything looked simple there until the wind shifted, and here these guys are at the bottom of the gulch, and the fire's behind them coming up the gulch, with plenty of fuel to burn, and they lost it. So when you put that all together, and as you start to mature, you think, well, airplanes are a little tricky, not the worst. Jumping, yeah. And of course, if you get even a good jump, you can still bugger the hell out of an ankle, because the ground you're going into is never, a grassy meadow. And then fire behavior, that's tricky. And you have a fire boss not too experienced, and he sends the crew in a certain place and you know, the wind shifts, the fire gets behind them, and like in Colorado there a few years ago. So I think as you mature, you know, when you get into your 20s, you think, you know, there's more to life than just doing this. And a couple of my friends used to say, I'm not dying for no tree. So we, I think that college, so-called college generation that they've identified us as, you know, had those things in common. So.